Delhi. Delhi wants to be Dubai, and Dubai wants to be New York. So everybody wants to be something else, and everything is looking like everything else, or wanting to look like everything else. And that is something which is not what we need to do. I think the only way, and I'll tell you there is also a very rational reason why we shouldn't be doing it besides emotional reasons. I was talking about the choice which is related to how you should build using the sustainable means and materials which are available. So it is about that. So I'm not I'm totally in favor of, I think that's what makes cities great, that actually different people with different, like the Dutch expression is that different birds, maybe in English there's also an expression. My English is not that good. I used for 35 years I've been using Dutch, so please excuse me. But like different birds with different feathers should be there in a city. That's all right. That's understandable, and that's to be celebrated. So that's not the issue. But it was about, like I said, just for the sake of, if in the Peak District, if you say, if the choice means that somebody can put Chinese marble, then I think that's not the sort of choice which we should be celebrating. You can't just say history dictates everything. History is clearly a great input for your design, but you have to make the interpretation based on the culture which exists today on how you do it. But then look over your shoulder at all the sustainability and climatic implications. So it is, and very often it's not so much about the buildings but it's more about the spaces between the buildings. So Marine Drive is fantastic, not because all those buildings are fantastic, because they can come and go. Marine Drive is fantastic because of the curve which it has and the way you can see it. And those buildings, and there are many examples in different cities around the world where the buildings will grow in height and initially we'll feel a little repulsion. We'll say, oh, they were all 6-story buildings, now they're 12 or 8, look at that, sore thumb. But certain things will happen, and in due time they will all be 8 and 12 and Marine Drive, but it'll still be Marine Drive. But it's the space. So that's one thing. I feel very often as a designer when I'm doing large projects, where I work with lots of different designers, so lots of different architects, because I don't design everything myself. So I do the initial bit, which gives guidelines for lots of architects to work on, and sometimes different landscape architects. I might do a building, or I might do some landscape, but I don't have to do it. I feel very much like a director of a film. That is the role which I have. I think the director of a film has the role also of having a vision of what the story is being told. And then he gets the actors to tell that story. And that can be told in different ways. But the general thing which he wants to say, he wants to guard. I'm not the type of person who normally steps out of a contract easily. I try to change, etc. But still, it has happened a couple of times in India that I've just moved out because the architect is deciding so many things that the larger issue is not getting addressed, and the client is just too concerned about just building the square meters. In all my designs, by the way, I build the square meters which the client wants, so it's not like this that it goes at the cost of something. But the thought process is different, and you get something much more than that. And in India, I was just now talking to a young architect, urban designer, who was asking me, he says, where do I start in India? I said, it's really very difficult. I had the advantage that when I came back to India about 7-8 years back, when I got this Nilon project, which was a competition, and had the great advantage of getting a client who was willing to also discuss, etc. So I've had the advantage to be able to do that. The BDP practice, which I helped set up here, right from the beginning, I said it has to be multidisciplinary practice. So we have as many landscape architects and urban designers next to each other, working all the time, and the lines are not so strictly divided, so that people work on each other's field and understand each other better. And I think the primacy of the space between buildings, contrary to the primacy of the building, has to be accepted, because that's what makes cities. Buildings will come and go, and they are only once in a while a couple of monuments which will remain for centuries. But spaces remain very often for centuries. So they have to be designed well. And then the buildings have to be subservient, and they have to react to the building. Unfortunately, what is happening in India is that the government is not doing enough to predict and to tell developers, so even if what they will do with the public space. So I have had this situation. Nirwan is a great example. Fantastic clients. They would have loved to build onto the street and do something which would have generated, given some life to the street. But on the south side of Nirwan, there was a development road plan 7 years back. There was no idea about what that road was going to be, if it was going to be a flyover, if it was going to have an access, exit, nothing. So how can you then plan on your site something directly, abutting something which is totally an unknown factor? So what you then tend to do is, you have to turn your back. That's the only way you can do it. So you take a defensive strategy. And that's really, I think that's a very big issue. Because the moment you say the primacy of the space, then the government has to take its responsibility and come up first with guidelines and come up first with things. Because I don't think it's right to say that the developers are doing this and it's an easy way out. The government should be stepping in and doing this. The maxim which you are giving out talks also about that. It's meant to be talking about livable cities, not for the rich few. We're talking about livable cities for the vast majority. It may not work still in India that it's everybody, but basically so they have to be walkable cities so that we are all equal then, etc. etc. Yes. So we set up this magazine because we like I was discussing with Kaiwan, I was also discussing with Shashi about something about cities, this and that, and we said, let's do something about it. So we set up this magazine, and it discusses really aims to bridge a gap, because there's no parallel magazine like this. At least we did not have a single example of another magazine like this anywhere in the world. We do not know. If you know, please let me know. It's like National Geographic for cities. That's what we said. That's what we wanted. So everybody should be able to understand it easily, even if it talks about technical subjects. So we don't want technical people talking to technical people. That doesn't make sense. So that's why it's also called MyLiveableCity, because we think it's about ownership of the city, which we all have to take also. And so we hope that it works out. We are getting now, which has just gone on the stalls in some of the bigger cities in India, but basically it's also meant for smaller towns in due time.